8,850 meters, the mountain has stirred the imagination and courage of man for centuries. Hundreds have died trying to climb to its summit, and now a city slicker with a borrowed sleeping bag but a lot of heart is about to attempt to trek to its third base camp. This is the Everest Podcast.
And welcome to the 20th episode of the Everest Podcast. My name is Erick, and today was the sort of final day of our Everest trek, sadly. It was, all things considered, a fantastic day. We had, again, great weather and great views on the way down. And like I've mentioned before, I'm so much more of a descent guy than an ascent guy. Even at sea level, I just hate going up. So today was great. It was mostly, almost entirely down. We booked it from interim camp all the way back to base camp in just a couple of hours. Actually, just a few hours. But we took a lot of breaks along the way to soak in the sights, take a few pictures, and really enjoy our last few hours in the Everest Valley before we have to take off tomorrow to continue our journey towards Lhasa. Before I go any further, the word of the day for today is bright side. Bright side. And kind of like the song, Mr. Brightside, I guess. And you'll see why soon enough. There's always a bright side to every dark cloud, and there certainly have been some dark clouds over this trip over the past few days, but at the end of the day, when you're in Shangri-La, if you can't look at the silver lining and consider all that has been good and just wonderful about this trip, then I think you're missing the bigger picture. And I'll ramble on about that for a little bit in a moment. But like always, just wanted to give you a little highlight of the day. Again, last night I had a horrible time sleeping. In fact, for this entire trek, I think I've only had one good day of sleep. And that's definitely taken its toll during the day when I'm trekking. You just feel so lethargic at times, and you feel very slow, and I don't know, I think it's a combination of the altitude and the lack of sleep. But again, last night, just difficulty sleeping. For the most part, it's not the altitude as it is my cold. Like last night and the night before, I just kept coughing, and the coughing kept me up all night, which really sucked. And it is just, the air is just so dry up where we are at 19,000 feet. And at night, when you're congested and breathing through your mouth, you really get cotton mouth. And like there were times when I woke up and there was just absolutely no saliva in my mouth at all. My tongue was just, I couldn't even feel my tongue. It just was just this piece of cotton, it felt like, in my mouth. So pretty rough night. Woke up, was happy to be up. I was sort of watching my hour hand on my watch go around clockwise during the night, and finally when it was morning time, I was ecstatic that I could finally get up and not worry about trying to have to sleep and just get on with the day. That's how bad it was, I guess. After getting up, we had a great trek, like I mentioned before. We're just blessed with, again, another day of really, really good weather. And on the way down, we passed by a number of expeditions which were heading up in the opposite direction. It was good to see, actually, that we had sort of beaten some of the larger crowds, because with some of these larger expeditions, it certainly would have gotten a little more crowded on the base camps. I already mentioned before yesterday how one expedition pitched camp right next to us, and literally one of these tents was just like almost on top of my tent. So it was already getting crowded, and with more of these expeditions coming up, it would have been even more crowded. So with every step, as I got further and further closer to sea level, I could feel more energy just sort of returning to me. And this is probably mostly because of the oxygen. A lot of it is probably mental, but you could really tell the difference in oxygen levels. I mean, ultimately, we traveled from interim camp, which is at high 18,000s, back to Rongpu, which is 16,400. So the drop in over 2,000 feet had a huge effect. I suddenly felt like I was me again. I could climb up a hill without getting winded, and with every step again, I got more energetic and felt stronger, which was a great feeling. Actually, right now I feel like Superman because I feel like I have all the energy in the world. Like one breath now can sort of last me for the whole day. And more importantly, well, not more importantly, but just as importantly, you get very used to the cold when you're up at these really high altitudes. And now being down to even just 16,400 feet in Rongpu, the evening is now sort of quickly encroaching upon us. And the chill is coming in through the air, but I'm still wearing just a fleece because I'm so used to much colder weather. I don't know if this is why I have a cold now, but I feel fine with just a fleece on. And it's kind of cool. As many of you know, as all of you know who have been listening to the previous podcasts, we had a lot of drama with some hay for our yak, ultimately a lack of sufficient food for our yak to take us up to Base Camp 3. And like I alluded to yesterday, there was going to be some answering to the band. Well, I'm not quite sure how the idiom works, but basically a small little meeting of minds, confrontation type thing with our Tibetan guide today when we met up with him, and that's kind of what happened. So let me just give you some of the highlights, and I actually made some recordings of the actual conversation, so I'll play some of that for you as well. But just a little overview: we got back to Everest Base Camp and met up with our Tibetan guide. He had actually believed that we had reached Base Camp 3 already, because a Sherpa that we had passed on the way up to Base Camp 2 had come back and told him that he had seen us heading up towards that area. So he actually had thought that we had, reached our goal, which obviously wasn't the case. Anyway, in the next sort of 30, 45 minutes or so, in this little tea tent at Base Camp, our guide, myself, Giovanni, the Yakmen, and then 6 other just random guys who were in the tea tent participated in this little discussion about hay and base camps and the number of days we're supposed to have yaks. And you can listen in. I won't describe any further beyond just saying this is a pretty interesting conversation. It begins in Tibetan, so you probably won't understand very much, but then it quickly moves into English, and you can see how the conversation starts out just super confusing, with different people calling base camps by different numbers, which is part of the reason why there was confusion. But ultimately, the short of it is, it seems that the yak man that we had simply was just trying to cut a few corners, and instead of bringing enough food for the yak for 6 days, as was in the contract, he simply brought enough food for us to reach what he believed to be Base Camp 3, which was only Base Camp 2 for us. So that's the short of it. Our Tibetan guide feels terrible, obviously. Let me just play this for you, and you can listen for yourself.
So he did not bring up the hay enough. I have an agreement to spend 6 days over there. So that's their fault. So so shall we talk with the head of the monk? Maybe pay less or what? So I can refund you to you. So it's okay. So anyway, we are already here, already back to here.
Right.
So there's only one solution. So maybe I have to.
How much were the yaks in total?
So I'm paying around 3,000 yen.
3,000 yen. So about a little under 400 US.
Yeah. So maybe I have to give you something back. So that's all I can do here,
Okay.
So he's already, you see, I have an agreement for 6 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but they didn't know that bring the hay enough for the yaks.
Yeah.
So, but it's their fault,
I mean, I don't know what. I'll leave it up to you to figure out how you talk to the monks in the monastery. I think the only 2 or 3 things that we have are one, we just weren't able to go to Base Camp 3, that's kind of why we were here. So it's not even it's not a money issue. Part of it is, but a bigger part of it is just it's a big disappointment, right? In the itinerary, in the program, in the experience. So I don't know how to put a money value on that, right?
So that was just a little excerpt of our quote-unquote discussion in the tea tent at Everest Base Camp. As you can see, both Giovanni and myself, as well as Loga, are each in a pretty difficult bind. For Loga, obviously his job and his reputation is on the line. He definitely comes across as pretty desperate that we don't file any kind of complaints, because that would obviously hurt his reputation a great deal. For Giovanni and myself, we obviously don't want to screw him over. It wasn't per se his fault directly, although as customers the buck really does stop with him. One can say that it was basically an oversight on his end that we didn't double check and make sure that we had enough food for the yak. I mean, obviously it's hard to place blame, and that's not what I want to do, but at the same time, as customers, part of the majority of the reason why we came out here for the most part was to climb to Base Camp 3. Now, because of an oversight with food for the yak, we no longer can, and that's a pretty big deal considering how much money that each of us, Giovanni, Rick, myself, have put into this trip, and how much effort, as all of you guys know, we've put into this trip as well. So anyway, that's the tough bind that we're all in, kind of like a catch-22. There is no conclusion at this point. I will keep you posted, obviously. Giovanni and I and Rick are talking about what sort of compensation we would like to see because of this snafu. But again, it'll have to be some sort of, I'm sure it will have to come down to some sort of negotiation with our Tibetan guide. We'll see how much leverage we have over him and vice versa. In the meantime, though, I want to get back to the word of the day, or the phrase of the day, which is bright side, because at the end of the day, what really matters is that we did have a really great time on this trip. And yeah, we don't have now the bragging rights of having reached Base Camp 3, of having climbed to the highest point in the world that you can get to without any crampons or ice axes or any sort of professional mountaineering experience. So bragging rights are out the window. But at the same time, for someone like me who rarely does any kind of trekking at all, just the experience of having come so close to Everest, of having been with such great people, and having the experience of really taking on a pretty challenging trek at the end of the day has been awesome. And you really have to just realize, I have to really realize that there's always the bright side, and in this case there's a huge bright side. That the flip side of all this is that we did have an amazing experience. I'm going to come back with some awesome photos, awesome video, and a great story to tell. So that's the bright side. That's the way to think positively, I guess. I think that's it. So there's no need really to go through tongue twisters. Well, let's do it one last time, because you can compare and contrast it to the pretty shoddy performance I had just yesterday at intern camp. Oh no, rather at Base Camp 2. And you can sort of see the difference. So here we go. And my guess is I won't even be out of breath today, but we'll see. First tongue twister. I am a mother pheasant plucker. I pluck mother pheasants. I am the best mother pheasant plucker that ever plucked a mother pheasant. I am a mother pheasant plucker. I pluck mother pheasants. I am the best mother pheasant plucker that ever plucked a mother pheasant. The second tongue twister. Stanislawski's little sister is a syphilitic thistle sifter. Stanislawski's little sister is a syphilitic thistle sifter. And the third tongue twister. Blue glue gun, green glue gun, blue glue gun, green glue gun, blue glue gun, green glue gun. Wow, actually there is a big difference. That's pretty cool. So thanks again for listening in. I will actually continue to make podcasts along the way for those of you who want to keep listening in. We are from here heading to great cities en route to Lhasa. Tomorrow we are going to be staying in a small little town called Shigar. As far as we know, there isn't actually much going on in that town. But then the day after, we go to Shigatse, which is home to one of the best preserved monasteries in Tibet, and also home to the Panchen Lama, who is currently, I think, being held captive in China, but that is his home. And then from there we go to Gyansi, and then from there to Lhasa. because of the whole yak hay incident, we actually now have shifted our itinerary up by a day, and we'll end up with 3 days in Lhasa rather than 2. So again, a little more of the bright side, if you will. I have no complaints of spending an extra day in Lhasa. It's supposed to be just an amazing city with so much to see and so much to explore. So things to look forward to. For those of you who want to join in still, definitely continue to listen into this podcast series. I will continue to make episodes as we go forward to Lhasa. So thanks for listening in to this episode of the Everest Podcast. As always, for more information, check out my website at www.everestpodcast.com. Thanks.
For more information on Erick's Everest trek, as well as photos from his trip, please visit his website at www.everestpodcast.com.